Sam, thanks for making time, man. I know
Always.
it's the end. It's the end of your day, and you've just come back from Chicago. But I do have, I think, 9 or 10 questions to hit you up on, and I think people that do watch all this stuff will probably be interested to hear about it. So,
Yeah, it's only 2 p.m. my time, so if this was the end of my day, I'd be a much luckier guy. We're good.
so yeah, why don't you tell us about delivered media and how it differs from the rest of the field?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, like there are only so many ways that Amazon agencies can differ from each other, right? Like everyone says they're the best, everyone says that they use data the best, everyone, you know, there are only so many ways to be different. I'd say that for us, there are a couple key things. For one, we really intentionally run our team very lean and mean, and we're all within the U.S. So what I mean by that is I think there's a really common trend that I see, which I mean, for really large agencies, it's somewhat unavoidable. But one thing that ultimately does lead to a good amount of client dissatisfaction is they speak to somebody throughout a sales process. They get to like this person. This person's well spoken, and then when it actually comes time to implement everything from an Amazon standpoint, they get passed off, and that person may or may not be good, right? So often it'll be someone more junior. Sometimes it's somebody in another country who might not be on the same time zone as them, which can make communication pretty difficult from time to time. It's not always the case, but definitely something I've seen. For us, we're founder led, so myself and the two co-founders work directly with all of our clients, and our whole team is senior level from an experience standpoint because we don't really have the time to hire and train people without experience. So I'd say that's a big one. Outside of that, we're all month-to-month contracts, um, and then we're definitely very bottom line focused. So I'm not a big fan, or we're not big fans of just pumping up spend for no reason and only paying attention to top line. We like to make sure our clients are profitable, and that's always top of mind for us.
Get it, get it. So, I guess more about your clients, and you mentioned them there. Obviously you've got some great case studies, and I've read some of them, like the Loom Cube or whatever. Um, and I know your expertise is DSP from your days at Thrasio. So why don't
Yeah,
you share a bit about how DSP plays a role in all your clients, like how big of a role that is, or anything you can share.
yeah. Yeah, it's definitely dependent from client to client, and anyone who's run DSP will tell you that it's definitely not for everyone. In general, the clients that have a ton of success in the DSP really already have a dialed-in PPC strategy. So typically, when we take on new brands, unless they're really big, we launch PPC and clean everything up first, and then layer in DSP. But the two are really meant to work together, right? So PPC drives a lot of traffic to the pages. We use DSP for things like retargeting, product purchase remarketing, cross selling between products within a brand, and then ultimately more upper funnel discovery. So the two really work in tandem, and ultimately DSP is a better fit for some brands than others, but it typically operates around 30% of PPC spend, and we always see a lift when we increase PPC spend. DSP performance does better. Once we layer in DSP as another level of clients, PPC improves. So they're really they're pretty different, but they're two sides of the same coin. So when clients are ready, it's a it's been an effective lever for us pretty much across the board.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Speaking of things kind of, two sides of the same coin, and this may not be the same coin, but lots of people are talking about AMC, right? Now, I guess, does that play a role in delivered now or in the future? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's funny. We were actually talking about this a bit yesterday. We don't use it a ton, honestly, at the moment. I do use it sometimes. The only thing that I really use it for at the moment is for the correlation in conversion rates when you're running PPC, DSP, or both in tandem. So, what are we converting at when only one is running? What are we converting at when neither was running? And how are our overall sales and conversion rates affected when both are run in tandem? Just because the data is so siloed, as the DSP lives completely outside of Seller Central, that
Mhm.
a lot of the time you're doing manual math and you look at the data individually and it tells you one story. AMC is a really helpful tool for combining that data and getting a more holistic story. But I know there are a ton of levers that we just haven't tapped into yet. So it's definitely on the radar, but it's just not something I can say we've used extensively. I know at Thrasio, we had a lot of people doing things with it, and it seemed interesting. It's ultimately just a lever that when you have to put the time into really learning how to do it, you have to have the time to do that. And it's a powerful tool when you know how to use it right.
Get it. Okay. Just like everything else in this industry, right? Powerful when you know how to use it right.
Yeah, and it's all data, right? So it's like you get instances where you have an overload of data, and ultimately I think that AMC is really valuable for big clients spending a ton of money, collecting a ton of data and analyzing that data. But if a brand isn't doing a ton on Amazon yet, then it can ultimately sometimes just be too much data. And sometimes I prefer to zoom out a little bit. Like, what did our overall sales do when we pulled this lever? And that sometimes is simplifying things. Sometimes it leads to better performance.
Oh, I totally get it, man. Totally get it. And I guess just on the topic of zooming out, obviously Amazon is pushing every advertising product under the sun. And, as you know, with AMC, it's all about the data and all that. How do you think, broadly speaking, AMC will play a role in not just your agency, but other agencies like optimizing DSP or anything like that? What role do you think it plays, big picture?
I think it'll definitely help with figuring out how much to spend, at least in DSP. I think that when you use AMC, at least in the way that I've used it for correlation and conversion rate when launching DSP and when not, it'll tell you a different story sometimes than what you see directly in the platform. But I honestly, I think that it's not going to do anything but encourage people to ultimately spend more, as it is an Amazon product at the end of the day. And all the data that I've seen from it say that when you spend on both, your conversion rate's better, which I do think is mostly true. However, of course, it's going to say that. So yeah, I think it's going to encourage more ad spend. Like, I think that's how it's going to shape out, which I think for some brands will work out, other brands it won't. But I see no world in which AMC doesn't ultimately just encourage brands to push the gas, honestly.
So I love that answer, man. Just one last thing on DSP. Are you seeing any changes in DSP recently? Like, it could be anything, like the console, the UI, how it works, like anything
I see
new there?
Yeah, I've seen some good ones and some bad ones. I'll start with the bad. They rolled out some machine learning, whatever optimizations. We changed the way that we're going to be optimizing our campaigns, and you have no control over it. And it's caused a lot of weird issues with budgeting and pacing. For one, they had a couple days where budgets were exceeded at the order level pretty significantly across basically every brand from people that I've talked to. Some were excluded from this, but they've been having issues with budgeting and pacing. A lot of instances where accounts that spend a good amount on certain strategies in DSP were completely unable to spend. So I think they rolled out an update and they're working through the kinks. Ultimately, it seems to be getting better, but whatever update that they rolled out that was meant to improve performance across the board for the DSP seemed to do the opposite from what I can see. So that was kind of a bummer, but they seem like they're figuring it out. I don't know. But outside of that, a couple positive updates. One, they're making it a lot more user friendly. The UI has changed pretty substantially in the past 6-8 months, just because there were a lot of minute details within the DSP that could make pretty significant differences, right? So when you're looking at audience targeting the DSP, you use and or qualifiers and positive and negative audiences. So it's like a Boolean string. Basically, when you want to include two audiences together, meaning somebody has to be in both, you put an and. When somebody has to be in either of these audiences to get targeted, you put an or. And then if you do a negative audience, it means that somebody cannot be in this audience if they want to get targeted. But the way that you combine these, a simple flip of an and or at a negative audience can literally lead you to target exactly the opposite of who you want to target. And I've seen it happen 100 times. But the DSP is taking some initiative to flag these things like, hey, I don't think you meant to do that, like the little paperclip guy. Or just purely like break out the UI to have include and exclude versus like a box where you check so it says not. Like little things like that to make sure that people, so they're not losing business to user error at the end of the day. And then the overall order setup process has gotten a lot cleaner, or offering more options as far as, you know, focuses of the campaign. So all that to say, it's becoming more user friendly. And then lastly is they're making a big push to contextual targeting. So contextual targeting was something they rolled out probably a year and a half ago, maybe, and they didn't really explain outside of what contextual targeting is, how it worked. And they're definitely rolling out more options to target contextually versus just based on audiences. So that really expands what we're able to do. Oh, and the last thing is a big push to connected TV, but that's a whole other can of worms.
Okay, it's very interesting. This is, you know, appreciate you going into the detail there, man. That's very, very interesting.
Yeah, of course.
Just speaking of kind of tools in general, like I'm changing gears here a bit.
All good.
What are your thoughts on ad technology, like, you know, all the ad tools out there and all that, and charging based on percentage of ad spend? Like, you know, I think you and I were chatting after Accelerate, and there seems to be some different views in the industry. What's your view of that?
I mean, for one, I'm pro ad technology in general. I mean, I wish I had thought of it. Like some of the things that I see in terms of the way that these ad tech businesses, they're innovative, they're helpful, they help brands and agencies perform better when used correctly. And I mean, the fact that they're able to sell software and then the agencies and the brands do the work and then they make money is absolutely genius. So good for them. That being said, the model of charging based on ad spend, it makes so much sense for these companies because it's no more work for them when you pay more and they make more money. It's genius. And especially because a lot of agencies charge on that same model, agencies may be incentivized to increase ad spend, which essentially means agencies are incentivized to increase ads, to increase this tech partner's profits as well. So it's genius in a lot of ways, but I understand from Amazon's perspective why they might not like that. Just because if you're Amazon, then you obviously also want brands and agencies to push spend more because you make that money. But having these tech tools that also charge based on a percentage of ad spend gives brands another thing to think about when they're increasing their budgets. So if a brand is going to spend another 100,000, they have to factor in, oh, okay, now our fee for this platform is also going to increase our spend. We're going to spend another 3,000 on that. So I understand from Amazon's perspective, they might not like it. But I understand it. I mean, if I was a tech company, that business model just makes a ton of sense to me.
Interesting. Very very balanced view there, man. You should have been a diplomat. So I guess just on that, what do you think a fair charging model would be? And I guess that question's about, you know, to balance agencies, balance the tool, balance the channels. Like how obviously there's the now, but do you think there's an alternate model?
I mean, that's a business idea in and of itself, right? Like if you create a software that doesn't charge on that, agencies that are spending a ton of money would always jump on the prospect of it as long as it's a good tool. So maybe you and I can talk about that later. But it makes sense. It makes sense for the software companies to charge this way. They would take a huge hit if they couldn't, right? Because what else do you really charge on? The only other things that I can think about would be flat fee per brand, right? Which doesn't make a lot of sense from a sales perspective necessarily, because it either means that you're going to overprice it for the small guys and you're not going to get their business, or you're going to heavily cut yourself short with the big spenders that you could have charged way more for. So that doesn't make a ton of sense. You could do it based on ASIN count. So brands that have a ton of products that they want to integrate, could get charged based on that. I mean, you could, number of keywords wouldn't really make a ton of sense. They'd have to have some sort of tiered model, I would say, and I'd say the pricing would have to be heavily customized to make sure that they're making sufficient money and not gouging.
There we go. Can you hear me? I think I got disconnected for a second.
Yeah, it was just the last 2 seconds. If you can just repeat what you said in the last
okay, yeah.
2 to 5 seconds.
I was just going to say that, I mean, we've run into a similar back and forth as an agency where there are certain clients that we do charge on a percentage of ad spend model because it makes sense for them. And there are certain clients where it absolutely doesn't make sense. They've had bad experiences where they worked with an agency and they felt incentives were misaligned and the agency just wanted to push spend no matter what, even if it wasn't working, because they made more as a result. So every client that we work with gets charged differently because there really is no one size fits all solution. So for a company like this, I mean, for a company that works with, a ton of different brands and agencies, it gets tough for sure.
Get it. Last question for you, Sam, before I let you go and give your brain a rest. Unbox New York. A lot of people talking about it. Are you going? And then, broadly speaking, what's your opinion of events like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, no, you don't need to give my brain a rest. I think I'm going to be thinking about a lot of this for the next 2 hours anyway, so I might as well get it all out. I am going to Unboxed in New York, which is a good thing because I think it'll be a great event. Not such a great thing because I don't usually like going to New York, but that's just me. I'm just kidding. We actually have some clients in New York that I'm pretty stoked to see, so that'll be a good time. I love going to events personally. I actually haven't really been to the big Amazon ones yet, but that's mostly just for circumstantial reasons. So I'm really interested to see how that goes. It's really interesting because I think that the networking stuff is great. I think usually when I go to events, like it's good when it's a healthy mix of informative sessions and actual networking, just because I have a tough time sitting and paying attention for too long. Like if there are too many speakers in a row, my eyes start to get glazed over like 2 speakers in, and that's not fair to the third speaker. So lots of breaks, networking opportunities. And for events like Unboxed that are incredibly targeted towards Amazon, you get like everyone there has something in common. Like the broader events that I've been to sometimes, which is fine. Like it's fun networking with all different sorts of people, but often there will be, so many people from completely different industries that, I mean, you can have a beer with them, but it's not like you're ever really going to work with them. But for events like Accelerate and Unboxed, I mean, I think they're healthy. I think it's good for business. I think you meet partners there. You can meet clients there. I think that you make friends with other people who do exactly the same thing that you do because you realize that it's a big space and you're not necessarily wishing for their downfall the way everyone seems to think it is. So I think it's a good time. I'm excited to check it out in New York.
Yeah, cool. I'm very glad to hear that. I guess my one tip I would add is definitely tour the dive bars around the event. It seems to be where most of the business is done.
I mean, honestly, depending on what the event is, I'm usually there in the middle. Like, yeah, I need to get a breather, and that's usually my go-to. So, oh wait, are you going? Or you're back in Australia now, so I'm assuming you're not coming back this soon, right? That'd be a crazy travel schedule.
Yeah, so some of our team will be there, and
okay.
I guess for everyone watching this, Sam and some of our team would be more than happy to meet you guys. But yeah, look, man, I really appreciate your 20 minutes. Obviously, some pretty deep insights and opinions there. So yeah, really appreciate it, and
Of course, brother.
yeah, hope to have you
Anytime.
back again, man. Appreciate it.
Anytime.